Hannah Foster, then 17 years old, left home on March 14, 2003, to see her friend Helen. They said farewell at the bus station a few hours later. Hannah was never heard from again after that. However, the British police's prompt action allowed them to identify a highly odd call to the emergency services, which ultimately contributed to the case's resolution. On August 31, 1985, Hannah Claire Foster was born in England. She resided in Southampton with her younger sister, Sarah, and parents, Hilary and Trevor. Hannah always aimed for the best marks and was an exemplary student. She was getting ready to start medical school in her final year of high school, and it was obvious from an early age what she wanted to study. Her family was always there to help her reach all of her objectives. Greetings from Unseen True Crime Stories HQ. I appreciate your support as we continue to grow and provide both untold and told real crime tales every day, viewers and subscribers in particular. Remember to subscribe to this channel. 17-year-old Hannah made the decision to take a break from her extensive studies and go for a stroll with her friend Helen on March 14, 2003. The ladies headed to a popular neighborhood pub for a drink and a bite. They made the decision to go home around 10:40 p.m. They were seen on video strolling along a neighboring street together. Helen's buddy claims that they arrived at the bus stop and began to wait for the shuttle bus that would transport her home. Since it was just a kilometer to her home, Hannah made the decision to walk since she didn't think it would be too far. The buddy said farewell as the bus pulled up, and it was the last time they ever saw one another. Hannah had not returned home after many hours. 5 a.m. Her parents started to become concerned on March 15th. She seldom returned home so late, and she always made sure to notify her friends if she slept over at their place. Even though Hannah's phone was still on at the time, they tried texting and calling her but got no answer. After a few hours, Hilary and Trevor made the decision to call the police around 10:30 a.m. Helen had already told them all that had transpired when they talked with her. None of Hannah's other friends knew where the girl was, so they phoned them to ask whether they had seen her that evening. The cops decided to begin searching for Hannah right away when Hilary and Trevor got to the police station. Since she was a juvenile, her 18th birthday was still a few months away, and because her conduct was out of character for her. The individual who last saw the missing person is regarded as a person of interest, as is always the case in these situations. In this instance, it was Helen, Hannah's buddy. Her parents were there when the cops interrogated her. Helen testified with great adamance. She corroborated to the police what she had previously told Hannah's parents, and the CCTV footage from the bus stop and bar supported her account. Since Helen had never lied, the inquiry was no longer interested in her. The police had to start searching elsewhere now that they knew she was not involved in Hannah's disappearance. The detectives were fortunate that the girl's mobile phone was still operational at the time. It remained on through the night and the early hours of the morning. She got texts from pals and calls from her parents at this period. Helen was phoning and messaging Hannah to check on her safety at home. Her phone's location may be tracked by all of these texts. The phone would connect to the closest communication tower if Hannah got a call or message. This would allow for the marking of multiple points. Additionally, the cops requested the phone provider to provide the girl's number's call and message history. The fact that Hannah's mobile phone was contacted by an emergency number in England early on the morning of the disappearance was one item from this record that caught the attention of the police. Subsequent analysis showed that the call was recorded as quiet in the emergency number records. There was no one on the other end of the phone when the operator took the call. She instructed the caller to hit any key on the phone if assistance was required, but no key was pressed. After a while, the operator thought this was a quiet call, ended it, and went back to work. In order to determine if they could discover anything in the call, a number of police technicians listened to it while varying the level. They were successful. They heard a girl, who they thought was Hannah, speaking to a guy in the distance. The media reported on the transcript once this call was decoded. The actual audio recording, nevertheless, was never made public. The caller, who was mistaken for Hannah, apparently did not hear any instructions from the operator since the phone was either in a bag or backpack or far away from the two individuals. Police believed Hannah was driving in the early morning hours based on the phone's movement. They had a lot of potential suspects after identifying the caller as an older South Asian person based on his voice and accent. Hannah's mobile phone was still in use when the call was found, which was fortunate for the investigation, and all reports were filed. As a result, the approximate location of her likely presence might be ascertained. Hannah was last spotted 30 kilometers from Portsmouth, where the phone was located. Finding the precise spot took many hours. The girl's phone and purse were eventually discovered at a rubbish collection location. The cops were beginning to dread the worst. After finding some of Hannah's personal possessions, authorities moved from examining her case as an abduction to one that may include murder. The investigators' worst suspicions were validated a few hours later. Hannah Foster's corpse was discovered in a thicket in the country on March 16th. The police's tremendous efforts, which entailed hundreds of personnel searching every location where the victim's mobile phone was recovered, allowed them to find it. Notably, the corpse was located many kilometers from the recycling facility where the handbag and mobile phone were discovered. As a result, it was assumed that the individual who did this first disposed of Hannah's corpse before moving on to her possessions. According to forensic analysis of Hannah's corpse, strangulation-induced asphyxia was the cause of death. There were scratches on the neck and face. It was clear from the girl's physique that she was struggling to survive. She also had a number of hematomas on her legs and head. A DNA sample was extracted from her body in the form of seminal fluid, and forensics also discovered that she had been raped prior to the murder. Although the search was inconclusive, the police added the sample into their database of all registered criminals. Thus, the material was preserved for comparison with potential suspects at a later time. The detectives knew at that point that they had to discover the individual who had killed Hannah, but it was a challenging task since they lacked particular suspects and clues. The team conducting the inquiry concluded that they may be able to uncover anything by looking through the CCTV video. They came to the conclusion that Hannah had been kidnapped and taken to the place where she was discovered in a white van after watching hundreds of hours of video from every camera along her phone's journey. This white vehicle was seen frequently and at every location where Hannah's phone was linked to the communication towers in many CCTV photographs. A 35 to 40-year-old guy from a South Asian nation, such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Afghanistan, or Bhutan, was sought, according to the media announcement. Since it was anticipated that the guy would need to know the region in order to transport Hannah's possessions to the garbage collection site, he was meant to drive a white van and reside in the area where the corpse was discovered. A suspect was discovered a few days later. His name was Maninder Pal Singh Kohli. He was born in India, had 2 children, and was married to a Southampton lady. He had been a resident of England for many years and used a white van that the firm had given him for both business and pleasure. The delivery service employee's route closely matched the locations that were reported to the police. According to his boss, the day after Hannah vanished, the guy arrived at work with a scrape on his face and an anxious demeanor. He was reported to the police by his management. Neither in India nor in England did Kohli have any criminal history. He was a model citizen in both nations. A very responsible parent, the guy was. According to his children's teachers, he and his spouse consistently attended all meetings and took care of the kids. He was a highly diligent guy who never created difficulty, according to his neighbors. The police chose to look into him even though he had no criminal history and did not match the description of a guy who could rape and murder a girl. Additionally, they were successful in getting a court to grant them a search warrant for Kohli's vehicle. The car was discovered parked outside his place of employment. The guy always brought the van home from work, so it was somewhat odd that he had left it there. Blood and seminal fluid that matched the sample discovered on Hannah's corpse were discovered in the rear of the car. The blood discovered in the car's rear seat was that of the victim, and it belonged to the same individual. As a result, the police only and primary suspect in the crime was this individual. When police arrived at Kohli's house on March 19th to interrogate him, his wife said he wasn't there. He had traveled to India the day before, on March 18th, supposedly to see his mother who was near death. Kohli's wife went on to say that she was unsure of his return date. The detectives were quite uneasy since the suspect's brother was a police officer in India. They started to believe that he would never be apprehended, and it seems that their suspicions were validated. They received no response from the Indian authorities on Kohli's whereabouts. They were only informed that at that moment, they could not get in touch with him. The man's father made an appearance on Indian television, stating that if his son had committed a crime, he should bear the consequences. Officers thought that his family was aiding him in his concealment. His brother, meanwhile, served as his principal defense attorney, claiming that he was falsely charged and that he 100% believed he was innocent. There was an issue or something, Kohli's wife explained over the phone on the 28th or 29th. He has to return to the UK since they were being wrongly accused and she was being harassed. However, I'm certain that he is innocent. Hang him if he committed this crime. I'll be the last to stand up for him. Time went along. Months went by, and eventually a whole year had gone by since Hannah was killed, and nobody knew Kohli's whereabouts. The parents of the child were in dire straits. Since neither the Indian nor the UK governments responded to their demand that the murderer of their daughter be put in prison, they made the decision to visit India to learn more about the status of Kohli's case. The country's media was exploited by the parents. They appeared on TV, in newspapers, and even distributed posters with Kohli's and their daughter's faces, asking people to report the guy if they saw him. Additionally, they said that they were willing to provide a monetary prize to anybody who could give information on the individual who is sought by English police. A taxi driver's statement surfaced a few days after they arrived in the nation. According to the cabbie, a guy who had Kohli's facial traits entered his vehicle. They conversed throughout the journey, and the guy introduced himself as Mike, who lived in England, was a courier, and was now on holiday in India. Unfortunately, the police were unable to locate the individual despite the taxi driver providing them with all the information. An Indian police officer stopped Kohli on a bus headed to Nepal on July 15, 2014. This officer was responsible for identifying him when his face appeared on national news. Kohli and his new bride were on their way to Nepal. It should be mentioned that Nepal and the UK do not have an extradition pact, which is why the authorities believed he was attempting to enter the country. The guy was already a different person. The cabbie said that his true name was Mike. He shaved his head and beard, got a new job, and even got a new wife. Hannah's parents and family believed that the guy would be taken to England and that the procedure would conclude there. The process that followed, however, took many years. Kohli admitted to raping and killing Hannah on a TV show sometime after his incarceration. She informed him she would denounce him to the authorities, but he said he had no plans to murder her. The police did not bring Kohli back to England right away, despite the fact that his confession was captured on camera and that his whereabouts in India was known. With his brother's assistance, the guy engaged a group of attorneys who prolonged the proceedings. To prevent this individual from being sent to England for prosecution, there were 35 appeals and 100 court sessions. As I previously said, his brother was responsible for all of this. He told many media sites that Kohli was innocent, that he was a phony who murdered Hannah, and that the government was using this as part of a plot to identify the guilty culprit and end the investigation. Only in 2007 was the decision made to extradite him to England so that he may stand trial. When Kohli landed in England on July 28th of that year, he was taken into custody by police. He was accused of murder, rape, and abduction. He altered the narrative he presented on television in his own country and entered a not guilty plea. At first, he said that he discovered Hannah's corpse in a vehicle, became alarmed, and disposed of it where the police discovered it. The time frame provided by the security cameras and Hannah's phone location, however, did not correspond with this story. Additionally, the seminal fluid discovered on Hannah's corpse was identified as Kohli's by the DNA test. This revelation caused him to revise his version once again. The guy said that he had thrown away Hannah's corpse because he did not want his family to suffer since a gang of thugs had forced him to rape and murder her that evening. The following theory of what they think transpired that evening was presented to the court by the prosecution. At the bus station, Hannah and Helen bid each other farewell. Hannah watches as her buddy boards the bus and departs. Then she begins to walk home. She was essentially wandering by herself on the side of the road, since no automobiles nor people were in the area. For his part, Coley was returning from his job. He chooses to pull up to Hannah in his vehicle and speak with her after seeing that she is walking by herself. The girl carefully calls the emergency number as soon as she recognizes that this guy poses a danger to her. She doesn't follow the operator's directions by raising the mobile phone to her ear. According to the police, Hannah's phone was either in her handbag or in the rear pocket of her jeans, which is why the recording sound was so faint. You can hear Hannah beginning to tell Coley lies. She tells him her sister's name, her age, and a neighborhood that is quite different from the one in which she and her parents resided. She obviously didn't want a stranger to know her personal information. Coley somehow got Hannah into his vehicle after providing the guy his personal information. Since the discussion had already finished, it is unknown whether he coerced her into the vehicle or lied to her about offering to drive her home. According to the police, he drove Hannah for a few kilometers, pulled over in a random spot, placed her in the back seat, raped her, and then murdered her. After disposing of the corpse, he drove a few more kilometers till he came to a rubbish collection location. Since he believed that the authorities may not be able to accuse him if he had nothing of Hannah's, he did not want to take any of her possessions with him. However, Coley was unaware of a crucial piece of information that would come out during the investigation. The girl's mobile phone was turned on and had a battery that might last for many hours. He disposed of the girl's possessions, went back to his house, spent time with his family, and resumed his regular activities. He made the decision to hide in India after learning that Hannah was being sought after. On November 25, 2008, after a trial, the man was convicted guilty of all counts and given a life sentence with the option of release after serving 24 years. The court noted that Coley, who was 41 at the time of sentence, would not be eligible to petition for parole until 2032, when he would be 65. What are your thoughts on this story, friends? Post your thoughts in the video's comment section below. If you like this video, remember to subscribe to the channel. See you shortly.